In the world's fastest sports cars are famous drivers from all areas of motorsport. Nearly 20 ex-F1 stars, as well as experienced endurance racers and young guns of the future. But it's the cars that are the stars in this series. If you've $1 million to spare, you can take your pick of race-prepared supercars that have F1 power and speed.
The cars everybody likes. I think the dream cars, any kid and any man from 7 to 77 love this type of cars. You don't see them very often in the street. Someone sometimes parks in front of big hotels, but here they're there, you can see them, and I think they're very exciting for everyone.
Most spectacular of all is the Mercedes CLK, built just days before the first round.
I think it's a nice looking car, it has got great potential. It's definitely not a race winner yet. We won the first race already. It took time. It took place in the winter time. It was really tough working between 6th of December and Friday before Easter when the car ran first. So I think this was for us a big satisfaction. And well, winning the first race is not a realistic goal.
But with the talents of Bernd Schneider and Alessandro Nannini on board, Mercedes are serious title contenders. The McLaren is an endurance racing champion. The Gulf team won the title last year with Englishman Ray Bell. His main challenge comes from the Works BMW McLaren pair JJ Leto and Britain's Steve Soper.
The championship's new to everybody. The competition's new to everybody. We've tested a lot, but unfortunately nobody's tested with us. So we don't really know what the others are capable or even up to. So this is a learning curve for everybody. We'll have to just wait to see, you know, what comes at sort of after 4 hours where we are, if we're happy or unhappy.
And Bell knows he's got a fight on his hands this season.
It's very competitive. There are actually 15 cars capable of winning. And it's tighter than it's ever been. I've now done this for 3 years, and this is the tough one.
Porsche are here in force. Their main hope lies with veteran Hans-Joachim Stuck and Thierry Boutsen in the Works GT1. Many think the Lotus is the prettiest car in the pit lane, but there are doubts about its speed and reliability. Perhaps the American Panoz is not so pretty, but underneath lurks a high-tech front-engine Reynard chassis. Drivers include Brits James Weaver and Le Mans winner Andy Wallace. Who better to sum up this year's championship?
Well, this is a pretty new era for sports car racing. Suddenly, because the ITC was cancelled, everybody has piled into GT racing, and the FIA have taken over the series, and it's the World Series, and it's going to be very, very competitive. But you get a 4-hour race, and certainly last year it was the case that you could just do an hour on a tank of fuel and a set of tyres. So what you did was you divided the race into 4, and it's 4 one-hour sprint races, if you like. So just because it's a 4-hour race, you don't necessarily pace yourself. In fact, that's not going to work if you do. You hammer the car as hard as you can for an hour, pour yourself out of the cockpit, change drivers, tyres, fuel, and the next guy does the same for an hour. And of course you do 2 stints each, and so the car doesn't get any rest at all. It's just hammered for 4 hours.
Sharing the other Works Panoz with David Brabham is Perry McCarthy. He raced in F3 with Damon Hill and Johnny Herbert and sometimes beat them, but he never quite made the big time. Now team manager David Price has given him another chance in GTs.
Yeah, I kind of just think sometimes, crikey, I wish things had gone an awful lot better in Grand Prix, because of being the big-headed so-and-so I am, I do think I could have been at the front, but life doesn't always work out like that. But, you know, instead of throwing the toys out the pram, you've got to get on with the job and go out, and this is a world championship, so maybe this year or maybe next year I can be world champion in this, you know.
And there's a race within a race. In the FIA GT rounds, the GT2 class caters for the less highly developed cars, but the battles down the field are just as intense. The 3 Oreca team Chryslers are the cars to beat, and driving one of them is Justin Bell, son of 5-time Le Mans winner Derek.
Essentially, if you like, it's the natural spirit of GT racing. I mean, it's where it all started. The Porsche 911s and the Vipers have been on board since the beginning. And last year we were in GT1. We're now a GT2 car. It's actually what the car was designed for, and if anything, they conform far more tightly to the road car specifications. Whilst GT1 is obviously on its own career path, and looking at the grids here, it's probably the most sensational racing in sports cars we've seen for about 6 or 8 years. GT2's got its place, but it's going to be tough racing.
The difference in speed between the 2 GT classes was immediately obvious in practice. a GT1 McLaren leaves even the fastest Vipers trailing. Obviously, lapping those slower cars can cause problems, but that's part of a challenge of endurance racing. And in qualifying, not surprisingly, the McLarens were extremely quick. The number 2 Golf car, driven by Jean-Marc Gounon and Pierre-Henri Raffinal, third fastest. Second quickest was the Works BMW of JJ Leto and Steve Soper. But the big surprise was the immediate impact of Mercedes. This amazing machine only completed days before the event, yet Bernd Schneider took it round a second clear of the rest to win pole position. Preparations were nowhere near as smooth for the Dave Price Panoz team. They took the morning warm-up on race day a bit too literally. This blaze meant McCarthy and Brabham would spend their day watching from the pit wall. So it's Schneider in the Mercedes on pole, Leto alongside, ready for what should be a fascinating first round. 45 cars lined up for the start. That's Justin Bale's teammate Tommy Archer getting comfortable in the Viper. They should be the favourites in the GT2 class, fastest in practice, and their main threat probably from the other 2 Orica Vipers. Well, it's a long race, 4 hours ahead of them, and the cars setting off now on their warm-up lap. Stay with us for the start in just a couple of minutes.
Welcome back to Hockenheim. The GTs are on their rolling lap, just seconds from the start. Let's go straight to our commentator now, Simon Taylor.
This magnificent field of 45 GT cars completing their rolling lap as the pace car pulls into the pit lane. The silver Mercedes of Bernd Schneider on pole, the white McLaren of JJ Leto alongside, McLaren and Mercedes on row 2. The light is red, now the light is green, the race is on, and Bernd Schneider gets the jump. It's Schneider's Mercedes going in front, with Leto in second place. In third place, it's the other Mercedes of Nannini, very crowded in that first corner, and as they come out, there's a Porsche spinning. That's Hans Stuck. Hans Stuck has spun the Works Porsche right in the middle of the pack on the first corner, but at the front, the McLaren is starting to ease away from the Mercedes. McLaren 1, Mercedes 2, Mercedes 3, going down to the first chicane. JJ Leto leaves his braking as late as possible. It's Leto who leads. It's Schneider in second place, it's Nannini in third place, then it's the McLarens of Gounon, Cox, Nielsen, and Andrew Gilbert-Scott is in seventh place, then it's the Jan Lammers Lotus. He managed to avoid the spinning Porsche of Hans Stuck, so he's in 8th place, and Stuck has got going again. Stuck is right at the tail of the field, but as they come up now to the second chicane, one of the Mercedes has slowed. It's Bernd Schneider who's lost his second place, fallen back into the clutches of the rest of the McLaren, so now second is the Mercedes of Alessandro Nannini, but it looks as though Bernd Schneider, the pole position Mercedes, is already in trouble. The rest of the field pouring through. They're 3 abreast at the chicane, that Marcos being pushed across the curbs, Hans Stuck stuck down in the traffic, but there now is Leto easing away from Nannini. The rest of the McLarens following through. Nielsen running right over the curbs, kicking up the dust, but everybody else getting through, although the flag marshal's got his yellow flag waving already, and Leto comes down the straight into the stadium to complete the first lap. It's Leto, Nannini, Gounon, Cox, Nielsen, then Gilbert-Scott, the 2 bright yellow Lotuses, you can't miss them, and the rest of the field 3 abreast. There's the Panoz spouting flame, but that Mercedes of Bernd Schneider has slipped back and back and back. I think he must be on his way to the pits. McLaren's at the moment dominating the front of the race, but Alessandro Nannini in the one remaining healthy Mercedes. There's the unhealthy Mercedes creeping, I'm sure, back to the pits. A little bit of smoke from the back, I think. Something's getting very hot inside there, and the rest of the little GT2 Porsches clambering all over the Mercedes. Mercedes trying to get across to the pit lane, and there was too much traffic for Bernd Schneider to do so, but he is now in the pit lane, and the front wheels are locking. As we ride now with Hans Stuck, this is the start, a replay of Hans Stuck going into the first corner, and Andrew Gilbert-Scott's car in front, he hit it, Stuck hit it, the car goes round, the front bonnet almost comes off, but he does a complete 360 degrees restart. I would think that somebody must have tapped Stuck behind just after he tapped Andrew Gilbert-Scott. No damage to Gilbert-Scott, but Stuck has done this very slow lap. He's now in the pits, there he is, with the front bodywork being replaced, and that is a terrible start to a 4-hour race for Hans Stuck. He's very quick. He got a little bit too excited on the first corner, and now he's going to be right at the back of the field. He restarts, the car goes out of the pits, but Hans Stuck is now last, and there is the Mercedes, and you could see as it came in that the front wheels were locked. Wurz and Bernd Schneider, little glimpse of them talking then over the cockpit. It looks pretty leisurely, and whatever the problem with that car is, it looked like locking front brakes. That is obviously going to drop them right out of the order. But it's a long, long race. We've had a lot of incident already, and that's Vito Rösler's GT2 Porsche. That hasn't lasted very long. He looks as though he's an early retirement. Bernd Schneider there, out of the pole position Mercedes as the mechanics crawl all over it. And there is the dramatic front-engined Panoz with Andy Wallace at the wheel, following the little Italian Lotus of Mimo Schiattarella, dicing over 14th place. But that front-engine Panoz, you can't miss its unusual profile. You also can't miss its thunderous V8 exhaust note. 3 Vipers in line astern, 1, 2 and 3 in the GT2 class. Tommy Archer, the American, is leading. Olivier Beretta and Jarno Nurminen, his teammates. But under pressure is Nurminen now, because there's a GT2 Porsche on his tail. There's another GT2 Porsche in all sorts of trouble, an expensive engine blow-up, I should think, for him, as the 3 Vipers come by. And there is the Uwe Altzen Porsche attacking Nurminen and actually going through. The black Chevrolet Corvette follows with another of the 2 GT2 Porsches. And meanwhile, this is all the traffic that JJ Leto has to work his way through. He's coming up to lap the Marcos now. And another man who's got a lot of traffic to contend with is Hans Stuck. After that disastrous start, he's got his new bonnet, he's working his way up. In fact, he's now up with that GT2 battle. He's up with the Vipers and leaves his braking late enough into the chicane to go past Uwe Altzen and make up another place. And in the pits, one of the Lotuses, that's Fabien Giroir. Early engine problems apparently for the V8 Lotus, another rather untried car, and it's stationary still in the pits, although teammate Jan Lammers is still out there and doing well. Yellow flags waving, a GT2 Porsche just recovering from a spin, and look at Nannini weaving his way through the traffic in that wonderful looking silver Mercedes. Tremendously potent looking car indeed. Remember, it's absolutely brand new. They've had virtually no testing. They've really only just got that car screwed together. And Nannini must be very pleased that although his teammate has had problems, he's still there in second place. Behind the string of McLarens, Collard and Bouchou battling for 7th place in their GT1 Porsches. Jan Lammers is in 9th spot, but Jan Lammers is in the pits now. Lammers coming in for, I think, an early stop. I'm surprised he's in as early as this. They're refueling the car. Lammers out. Fellow Dutchman Mike Hetsemans in. And JJ Leto, the leader, has now caught up with the flying Hans Stuck, both of them headlights blazing. Stuck, of course, making up time after having restarted at the back of the field. JJ Leto has led this race right from the beginning. And now we've got, for the first time this year, a gauge of the performance differential between the latest McLaren and the GT1 Porsche. Stuck certainly doesn't want to make it easy for JJ Leto. They're coming down the straight, getting up to 200 miles an hour, and the McLaren pulls out of the slipstream, leaves his braking late and goes ahead. So the leader laps Hans Stuck, but Stuck is going to try and hang on, because if he can follow the leader through, he's trying to get up through the field after his earlier delay, and he could get a good route past the slower cars. They're with one of the Vipers now, and look at JJ Leto ruthlessly goes past the Viper, and so does Hans Stuck. He's tucked in the slipstream of the McLaren, and he, of course, has made up a real place. The car in second place, you see it just behind that wonderful silver Mercedes. Alessandro Nannini still in second place, still JJ Leto the leader, and Hans Stuck fighting up there with them, albeit a lap behind. Andy Wallace and the Panoz follows the Mercedes into the chicane, that wonderful looking Mercedes. And there's Pierre-Henri Raffanel, Jean-Marc Gounon's co-driver. The Gounon McLaren in third place at the moment comes in for its routine stop. Now let's watch this, because the rules this year say that while you're refueling the car, you're not allowed to start working on the wheels and tyres. The wheels and tyres, one mechanic only each side, they're waiting impatiently while in goes the fuel. And you'll see that once the fuel has finished going in, then the 2 wheel and tyre mechanics can start. They have to do both front and rear each side. And here's our man just starting now because they finished refueling. He does one front wheel off, new wheel on goes the wheel nut, and when he's finished that, he's got to run to the back and get the rear tyre done, and that one off, that one on. Much longer pit stops, therefore, than we're used to seeing in Formula One racing, and it all is part of the emphasis in endurance racing on the pit work. They also have to stop the engine during the pit stop, and they're starting it up again. No, there's a problem on the right rear. They haven't got the right rear finished. He's going to have to turn the engine off again. He does so, the engine off, and they're working on the right rear, and this is bad news for Gunnar and Raffanel, because this car was in third place. It's going to be slipping down the order, I think. Now they've got it right. Out of the pits he goes, but he's dropped down to 5th place now. In comes the Mercedes of Alessandro Nannini. Will the fuel rig reach? Looks as though he's parked too far away. Well, the mechanics managed to get the fuel line on now, but that looked like quite a problem for a moment. Nannini talking to his co-driver there, Marcel Thiemann. Now he's coming over to talk to the chief mechanic, telling him what's going on inside that Mercedes. Lots of action in the pits now because we've got Hans Stuck in. They're changing the wheels. Thierry Boutsen climbing aboard. And now there's the leader, JJ Leto, in the pits. Hands over to Steve Soper. It's all going well for Leto.
I think that the biggest trouble was to get my Mercedes, in the beginning, and then I just kept my pace, basically. It was a lot of overtaking, and sometimes you lost, sometimes you gained, but I wasn't pushing 100%, we were just sort of trying to save the tires and everything for Steve as well.
All that, and he's suffering from chickenpox, poor man. But here is the work going on the Mercedes. They haven't got that Mercedes out of the pits yet. Soper back in the race, still on the same set of tyres. They didn't change tyres on that car. Obviously the tyre wear is well under control. Steve Soper still has the lead. The formerly second place Mercedes of Alessandro Nannini is still in the pits. They're still working on that, and that means we've now got McLaren's 1, 2, 3. Here's one of the Vipers getting it all wrong. That's John Hugenholtz, leaving his braking too late, coming into the stadium, entertaining the 30,000 plus crowd we've got here at Hockenheim today. Meanwhile, headlights blazing coming down the final straight. That's Andrew Gilbert-Scott in the second place McLaren. He's sharing with Ray Bellum. And one of the Lotuses going very slowly. The yellow car crawling down the long back straight. That must be Maurizio Sandro Sala's Lotus. Doesn't look at all healthy. And there's a McLaren missing. There it is. That's the Peter Cox third place McLaren. That's the Lotus crawling back to the pits. But Peter Cox's McLaren is parked out on the circuit. There's the leading car passing its teammate. So Peter Cox's car has come to a complete halt. That's one of the major McLarens, one of the BMW Schlitzer-entered McLarens, stopped, but the other one still comfortably leading the race, lapping the other Panoz. So still Steve Soper leading the race, using all the curbs, very, very determined through the back markers. Steve Soper is chopping one of the older privately entered McLarens there, elbowing a GT2 Porsche out of the way, coming through the stadium. But in the pits now, that little Lotus has finally got there, and they're working on Maurizio Sandro Sala's Lotus. But for this first race of the GT series, a lot of people are treating this race pretty much as a test session. Looking very reliable, however, the Vipers still 1 and 2 in GT2.
So these are the standings, 37 laps gone, McLaren's in the top 4 places. Soper and Leto lead the way in the BMW Works car. Then it's the British pair, Ray Baum and Andrew Gilbert-Scott, with Thomas Boucher and John Nielsen third in their Golf McLaren.
And this is the car that's third in GT2, Franz Conrad's Porsche, and that's gone horribly wrong. Looks as though the front left suspension has collapsed. Look at the dotted rubber line he's leaving. He's trying to get that car back to the pits. I don't know if he's going to make it. As once more we look at our leader, Steve Soper, in the McLaren that has led this race since JJ Leto took it in front right at the start. And look at that Franz Conrad Porsche trying to make its way back to the pits. Soper coming up to lap the little Italian-entered 4-cylinder turbo Lotus. Mimmo Schiattarella at the wheel. It's a bit short of steam down the straight, but it's being more reliable than its V8 cousins at the moment as the McLaren goes by. Franz Conrad's got that Porsche back to the pits. They're having a look at the front of the car. Clearly something serious had broken at the front. And Andrew Gilbert-Scott has brought the second-place McLaren in. Ray Bellum is now taking it out again. A brilliant double stint by Gilbert-Scott.
I felt I could have gone quicker, but I didn't want to take any risks. Obviously, I think that gave us some more fuel, because when I came in for my first fuel stop, which was, our strategy, which we've kept to, we really could have stayed out there a lot longer. The fuel meter was reading very, very well, and the tyres have been terrific. So, and apparently just now when they came off the car, they could have done another stint.
But in that pit stop, the Ray Bellum, Andrew Gilbert-Scott McLaren has dropped to third place behind the Gunnar Raffinel McLaren. There is Ray Bellum with on his tail now the white McLaren, the leader, Steve Soper, coming up in first place to lap the McLaren in third place, and a couple of GT2 Porsches ahead of them, and ahead of them the second placed car now of Gunnar Raffinel, as Steve Soper laps the third place McLaren as they come down into the chicane. And Steve Soper so quick through these back markers, absolutely relentless. You'll see him just, I'm sure, shovel those two little Porsches out of the way, and past he does indeed go. Ray Bellum follows him through, and there at the front, the Gunnar Raffinel second-placed McLaren, and then their headlights blazing, the leader Steve Soper and the third-placed man Ray Bellum. Ray Bellum, the reigning GT champion, he won the title last year. Classes himself as an amateur driver, wealthy amateur driver. He says he doesn't take his training very seriously. His way of training for a long race is to eat a little more chocolate cake. Steve Soper, by contrast, the supreme professional. He's been winning races in touring cars and in GT cars all over the world for a long time now. And this is him really settling into the groove with JJ Leto. Very neat, very tidy, very quick, very ruthless with those back markers, and always consistent is Steve Soper. JJ Leto, no doubt, plotting his progress from the pits. Soper will be bringing that car in before too long to hand over. By contrast to the McLaren whitewash, it hasn't been a good day for those two new Mercedes, both of them still in the pits. Let's hear from Dave Beckett down in the pits and Alex Wurz.
It was also the problem in the warm-up. We had the same problem, but it was too less time for the mechanics to change it, because it was the master cylinder was inside damaged, unfortunately, because the car was on pole position, and the lap times they do now in the race was not a problem for us, even with fuel, with maximum fuel. The other car had a problem on starting, because the starter went too hot, because we had no time to the whole race distance, and, you know, the car was built up the last few days brand new, and the starter didn't start, so that was the problem of the other car.
And Ray Bellum is not in third place. There's Ray Bellum, he's out of the race and back in the pits.
We changed over. Suddenly a slight graunching noise came in under braking, and 4 corners later, front of the studs broke off the front left wheel. Gave me a bit of a moment, but it's a pity, because I think we would have run into a podium there.
Rotten luck for Ray Bellum, but with two McLarens out, still these two McLarens in the lead. The Raffinel car just ahead of the leading Soper car, because Steve Soper about to lap Pierre-Henri Raffinel and be a lap ahead of the whole field, and there's a Porsche going off in front of them. The Porsche crashing into the barriers, comes back onto the road, oh, so nearly collects the first and second place McLarens. Miraculously, they just managed to miss the car, which has come to a halt half on the track and half off it. That was a terrifying moment. And we've got a Mercedes back in the race. They've got the Nannini car out again, and they've put Bernd Schneider in it, because Bernd Schneider, very much the Mercedes #1, has been nominated for both cars. And while one of the Mercedes is still left in the pits, this one is out in the race once more. Long, long way behind, but still running very quickly, running ahead of Emmanuel Kolarov in the red and white GT1 Porsche, twitching through the corner onto the start-finish straight. So at least some laps getting under the belt of the Mercedes team, even though they're completely out of the running here at Hockenheim. And there is the GT2 Porsche of Luca Riccitelli, which is still stationary, very badly damaged, and they haven't been able to move it yet. And in the pits is the leader, Steve Soper in the pits. He's out of the car, JJ Leto's in the car, and the leading McLaren, with JJ Leto back in the cockpit, goes back out into the race and back into the lead. And let's have another look, in slow motion this time, at that Riccitelli accident. The car spins on the straight. I think something must have broken, backwards into the barriers, bounces across, and miraculously, the leaders just miss it.
Welcome back to Hockenheim and the first round of the FIA GT Championship. Let's waste no time in rejoining Simon in the commentary box.
More problems for one of the Lotuses. This is the Giroud de la Trace Lotus. The marshal is there with the fire extinguisher, but it doesn't look fiery. I think the car has just stopped. And there's the Andy Wallace Panoz still going well. He's running in 10th place in that front-engine car. Much better than expected. It's very new, just like the Mercedes. And that wonderful grumbling exhaust note, the flames coming from the exhaust pipes, very distinctive. If they can get this Reynard designed car through to the finish of the race, then team boss David Price will be really happy. There's the third place McLaren, the Thomas Peugeot John Nielsen car. Still a McLaren 1-2-3, Leto and Soper in the lead, Gounon Raffanel in second place. In fourth place, the first of the GT1 Porsches, that's Martini and Pescatori. And amazingly, Hans Stuck and Thierry Boutsen have come up through the field, now into fifth place. Remember, they were dead last at the end of the first lap after that mistake by Hans Stuck at the very first corner. The Vipers still leading GT2, Beretta and Gash ahead of Justin Bell and Archer. And somebody's gone off. That's the first corner. There's a huge cloud of dust there. Somebody in the barriers down at the first corner. It's the Panoz. That is the Panoz. Andy Wallace is off at the first corner. He's got the door open. I think he must be out of the car already as the marshals run to his aid. That's a tremendous shame because that Panoz had been doing an excellent job. Here's a replay as the car plows straight on over the gravel, which does a pretty good job of slowing it down, but that car is in the barriers. That looks as though that's the end of Andy Wallace's race. They're dragging the car away behind the tractor with Andy Wallace disconsolately walking along behind it. The car doesn't actually look that damaged, but watching it live and looking pretty glum about it, the Panoz team in the pits. There's Perry McCarthy, who non-started this race. His car caught fire this morning, and his expression says it all. So that's Andy Wallace out, and there is the leading Viper, the leading GT2 Viper of Beretta and Gash. And Andy Wallace has got the Panoz going. They're waiting for him in the pits somehow. He's got the car restarted, and Dave Price's crew are waiting. Here he is. The car looks almost undamaged. So they're determined to keep the Panoz in the race. They're going to change the tyres. Out gets Andy Wallace, in gets James Weaver. Let's hear from Andy.
It's running fine. The only problem it does is it gets very hot when we stop, but otherwise it's running very well. Considering everything that's happened this weekend, if we can get it to the finish, we'll be pretty happy.
Well, a long, hard race for the Panoz guys, but they are still in the race. And also still in the race is the Conrad Porsche. This was the one, you remember, that had the front left-hand suspension collapse. It had a long pit stop. They've rebuilt all of that. It's now back in the race, driven by the team's number 3, Philip Pater. Thomas Peugeot now in that McLaren, that Gulf McLaren. That's the John Nielsen third-place car. And Thomas Peugeot, the wealthy German banker, not going as quickly as co-driver Nielsen was. They are still in third place. They're just being lapped once more by Steve Soper. They've just been unlapped by the red and white GT1 Porsche with its winker going. That's Emmanuel Collard. And I think John Nielsen will be concerned that Thomas Peugeot is not keeping up his pace. There's Bernd Schneider in the only Mercedes still running. He's pressing on, still very quick, still a long way behind. And Yannick Dalmas off in the 6th place GT1 Porsche. They have to be pretty tough, these cars. He's just driven over the curbs and got back into the race. The Beretta Gash Viper there, having a pit stop. No fresh tyres, it seems. There's Justin Bell in the other Viper, still second, behind Beretta and Gash in GT2. And the Collard GT1 is off. Jürgen von Gartzen's just taken that car over. He's spun coming into the stadium. Oh, he's found reverse gear. That's an unusual thing to see in these GT1 cars. He's trying to reverse all the way round the gravel trap, but somehow he's going to have to try and get on the track, and I don't quite know how he's going to do it from there. Oh, he's found forward motion, bit of wheel spin. Over the grass he goes. Jürgen von Gartzen and Emmanuel Collard had this car up in 8th place. He's going to want to get back into the race as quickly as he can. He could well have damaged the under tray on the grass. And there's a McLaren coming. That's the 2nd place Raffanel Gounon car. He's got a very slow moving Jürgen von Gartzen right in front of him, blocking him. Right winker going. Von Gartzen moves across, and the Raffanel Gounon McLaren manages to get by. but the fastest Porsche on the track is still the Hans Stuck Thierry Boutsen car.
That's right, a superb fight back by Hans Stuck and Thierry Boutsen in the works Porsche. They were last after lap 1, but they fought through to 4th place. Still though, Leto and Soper are way ahead. They've lapped everyone except Gounon and Raffanel in 2nd place.
There's Jean-Marc Gounon in his 2nd place McLaren. Behind him, a lap behind him, is Thomas Boucher in 3rd place. But behind Boucher and catching him very fast, Thierry Boutsen in the Porsche. We've got a real battle on for 3rd place now. There is Boutsen. They've come all the way up, have Boutsen and Stuck, from dead last to 4th place now. And to the dismay of John Nielsen, who's watching from the pits, his co-driver Thomas Boucher is getting caught by that flying Mobil 1 number 6 Porsche of Thierry Boutsen. 3 times a Grand Prix winner, one of the greatest drivers to come out of Belgium is Thierry Boutsen, and he loves this sort of challenge. He can see the McLaren ahead of him. Look at him using the curbs, flinging that wild-looking GT1 Porsche, nothing like a Porsche 911. It shares just a little bit of 911 silhouette, but it's pure GT racing car underneath. And Thierry Boutsen, just like Hans Stuck, getting absolutely the best out of it. Headlights on for both of them, and Boucher doing everything he can, but the Porsche is right under his rear wing now, getting into the slipstream. Boutsen's going to pull out and try and get by any minute, surely. Yes, he does, but Boucher shuts the door on him. Boucher just moves across. Boutsen tries to get the other side. And now as they come up into the chicane, Boutsen cannot get in front. Boucher shuts the door for the 2nd time. Thomas Boucher absolutely determined to shut Thierry Boutsen out. Thierry Boutsen isn't going to like that. He's going to get a run on him surely now. Yes, now he gets on the inside. Can he stay there as they go flat out down that slight right-hand curve that leads into the 2nd chicane? Boutsen has the inside line. They're wheel to wheel, and Boutsen is ahead. Thierry Boutsen takes 3rd place. The battle's going on all the way down. You wouldn't think this was an endurance race. It's a flat-out battle around Hockenheim. And now McLarens no longer have the top 3 positions, because into 3rd place has become the Porsche. There is the leading McLaren, however, still there, well clear of everybody else. I say well clear, but in fact Steve Soper's lead is only 1 minute at the moment. Steve still matching JJ Leto's lap times, very quick, very consistent, but if you're only 60 seconds ahead, it only takes a tiny problem in a pit stop to throw all that away. And we've got the class-leading Viper, the GT2 leading Viper of Beretta Gash, back in the pits. They were stopped not long ago, but apparently they didn't get enough fuel in the car, so it's had to come in again, and that should allow Justin Bell and Tommy Archer to get back into the lead of GT2. And there's James Weaver in the Panoz, pressing on after all their delays. They're still going, and in fact they're in 10th place, a distant 10th place. Who's that going off? That's the Conrad Alson Porsche into the barriers. What a shame. They've had so many problems in this race. They've completely rebuilt the front suspension, but they're going to have to rebuild it again. It's buried in the barriers at the start of the start-finish straight. Now the leader's in. This is the final pit stop, the final routine pit stop anyway, for the leading McLaren. Steve Soper gets out, JJ Leto gets in, and as they clean the screen and they change the tyres, so Steve Soper gets the door shut, he walks away. That's the end of his day's work. He's just got to sit and watch and see if JJ Leto can bring that car home at the end of a long day and see if they can hold on to that lead.
Everything is behaving itself perfectly, which is a little bit worrying when everything's too good.
You're in the difficult position now of watching JJ drive out the rest of the race.
Yeah, no, I have confidence in him. He knows how to finish a race, so we have a good advantage. Let's just hope we just cruise to the end.
Well, they cruise on. That final routine stop went well. There is JJ Leto at the head of the field still. The Mercedes is following, still going quickly, but so far behind. And meanwhile, Thomas Boucher is out, and a furious John Nielsen gets in. He thinks much too much time has been wasted. They've lost their 3rd place. He wants to get that car back on the podium. Look at him rocket out of the pit lane. And that's Hans Stuck. Now, Hans Stuck knows that the battle is on to hold that 3rd place. There's Stuck, who is still 3rd, waiting for Thierry Boutsen to come in. And if they can make a quick stop now, they may be able to hang on to that 3rd place. But John Nielsen is rocketing on in the 4th place McLaren. Hans Stuck then, waiting to take over this car, Thierry Boutsen at the wheel. Thierry Boutsen on his way back to the pits, followed by the Panoz of James Weaver. And we've got two Mercedes out again, one of them going extremely slowly, but still Mercedes trying to use this race as a further test session. They desperately need more miles. Alex Wurz has come out in the pole position car. Alessandro Nannini getting some driving in. In fact, I don't think that Mercedes is going to carry on much longer, but they are determined to get some more miles. There's the Panoz, never mistake it. And into the pits now, Justin Bell and Tommy Archer. Out comes Justin Bell. I'm told that there's a penalty for that car. Apparently Justin Bell has been speeding in the pit lane. They've brought the car in for a 10-second penalty, and they've decided to change drivers as they do so. That's lost them the class lead.
I didn't really want to get out, but it was a good moment for me to come and do it. I had the penalty, I had to come in. So, I mean, it's good. He'll run it to the end of the race now.
Encouraging signs for the first meeting anyway.
I mean, touch wood, both cars will sort of make it to the finish. We can get a 1-2, that's what I'd like.
And here's the third place Porsche coming into the pits. Thierry Boutsen brings that Porsche in. Hans Stuck is waiting to take it out again. And John Nielsen's gone through. John Nielsen goes down the start-finish straight over the start-finish line. It's McLaren 1-2-3 once more. And as they come down the long straight into the stadium section, the headlights blazing show us that there are the two Golf McLarens in second and third place. This is Jean-Marc Gounon in slow motion, the centre-seated McLaren. The road version actually has two passenger seats with the driver sitting in the middle. But of course, these racers running over the curbs, working hard. Just see his hand going down to the gear change there. They're completely stripped inside. Very rapid machines indeed. There's the Beretta Gash Viper back in the GT2 lead after Justin Bell's penalty, but the Bell Archer Viper still in second place. These Vipers use a V10 engine of almost 8 litres, actually based on a truck engine. It's a pretty simple, straightforward machine, but very rapid itself. And a Mercedes pit stop now. They may be a long way behind, but this is all part of the development. They're going to try and make this pit stop as quick as they can. Marcel Thiemann out, Alessandro Nannini in. We're in the closing stages now, but Hans Stuck still hasn't given up. He's pushing hard in that fourth place Porsche, still in pursuit of John Nielsen. And meanwhile, the silver Porsche, the second of these two, that's lying third in GT2 behind the two Vipers. This is Claudia Hurtgen, driving with Bruno Eichmann. She's gone extremely well today, 13th overall in this beautifully prepared car. Very smooth is Claudia, very consistent, and she'll be extremely pleased if she can get a GT2 podium here on her home ground at Hockenheim. There's our leader, JJ Leto, reeling off the closing laps of this race. John Nielsen has unlapped himself on Jean-Marc Gounon. He's still in third place. Gounon is still in second, but they're on the same lap now. This is Jean-Marc Gounon closing on one of the last year's McLarens, one of the private entries. And you can see the difference in the nose shape of the two cars. Last year's car on the right with a much cruder front and a much shorter tail than the new 1997 McLaren. What a beautifully turned out car that Golf McLaren is. Now here's the Schnitzer BMW McLaren pit. Steve Soper watching the screens, hoping that nothing's going to go wrong for his teammate taking the car that he's shared with JJ Leto towards the checkered flag. Now, I'm getting a reading on my television screen here. The computer timing is now saying that Gounon is in the lead. It's saying that Gounon is in the lead, that the Soper-Leto car is down in second place. Steve Soper's just seen the same thing, and I don't think he's a bit happy about that. Now, what's going on? Is it some sort of penalty for the lead car? For some reason, they're saying that the Soper-Leto car is second, and it hasn't got this lap advantage over Jean-Marc Gounon. They're saying Jean-Marc Gounon is now in the lead. No, now the computer's changed again. They've now put Soper-Leto back in the lead, demoted Gounon to second. I don't know what all of that was about, but I don't think Steve Soper enjoyed the experience. Just for a moment, Steve Soper thought that his car wasn't leading the race. JJ Leto there in that white McLaren obviously quite unaware of all the excitement that's going on in the pit. There is Charlie Lamb, the BMW. Oh yes, I think Steve Soper's pretty relieved. He had a nasty scare there, sitting there with his wife, watching the screens. But JJ Leto, on his final lap, comes round to take the checkered flag. JJ Leto and Steve Soper win here at Hockenheim, the opening round of the 1997 FIA GT Championship. A great win for Leto and Soper.
Well, congratulations, Steve. Tremendous start to the season for you.
Yes, very, very good, isn't it? Good feeling now, 4 hours later. Very good.
You can stop worrying at last.
Yeah, go and worry. You had to get up on the rostrum and congratulate JJ. Yeah.
And it's a celebration, obviously, for everyone involved, not just the drivers.
No, I think the team played a big part. Our strategy and our pit stops, everything ran very, very well. We had no problems with the car, no problems at all. So you have to take your hats off to McLaren and BMW.
And there's Charlie Lamb being congratulated by the rest of the Schnitzer BMW team. A tremendous effort by all of them. There's the GT2 winner, Olivier Beretta and Philippe Gache in the rumbling V10 Viper. And here is our second place man, Jean-Marc Gounon, brings the Gulf McLaren home in second place, despite what the computer was telling us. He never did lead this race, but an excellent second place and the middle of a McLaren 1-2-3. There's the Mercedes, the last classified finisher, as Pierre-Henri Raffanel gets the congratulations of the rest of the team, second and third for the Gulf McLarens.
So here's confirmation of that Soper-Leto victory. 1-2-3 for McLaren, but Stuck must be kicking himself for that first corner collision. And Mercedes not living up to their promise, 13th overall, while all the Lotuses fell by the wayside. It's a big hug then for JJ from Steve Soper, despite the chicken pox. If Leto can drive like that when he's ill, the others ought to start worrying. As for Panoz, well, it was eventful, but Andy Wallace did bring the number 4 Dave Price car home in one piece, and his teammate is looking on the bright side.
We beat Mercedes. Okay, we're only 11th, but we still beat Mercedes. It's how you present these things.
Quite right too. No Mercedes win for the German fans to cheer this time, but as consolation, the first car home was BMW powered, and by the time the series returns to Germany for round 4, we could be seeing those Mercedes drivers on the podium. So the perfect start for Steve Soper and JJ Leto in their McLaren. The GT circus is packing up here at Hockenheim to head off to Silverstone for the next round, and they'll be where the